Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Baranovsky-Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
Hello, and welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia. I'm your host, Patty Baranovsky-Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Steve Morris, a certified EOS implementer and business coach. So welcome, Steve. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thanks very much for having me, Patty. I really appreciate being here. Yes, as you said, I'm a certified EOS implementer. I'm a business coach. I just love helping business owners, leadership teams, and driven professionals really get unstuck from whatever it is that they're dealing with in their business, see the possibility of where they can get to, and help them create that path to navigate their course through to getting what they want.
Very nice. Now, you've had a diverse career from designing multi-million-dollar yachts to coaching high-performance teams. So how'd your experience in yacht racing shape your approach to leadership and business coaching?
Well, it's certainly a very formative time for me at the beginning of my career. So my first job right out of college, I'd studied mechanical engineering at college, and also around yachts and how the sort of the mechanics and the physics of how yachts work.
Okay.
So my first job right out of college was on a professional sailing team. And I went from studying mechanical engineering to being in a gym at 6 o'clock in the morning and lifting a lot of weight off of the ground to get fit enough and strong enough to be able to then, be a part of a crew. And we were getting an 85-foot racing ketch ready to go sail around the world. So I really got to sort of experience, what it was like to be part of a world-leading, high-performing team. And the roller coaster ride that was. And then, from that, I actually went into designing sailboats. And so I spent many years working with these incredibly high-performing teams, winning round the world yacht races, being in things like the America's Cup, which is kind of like the Formula One of sailing, and experiencing what it felt like when I was on a team and working with a group of people that truly were cohesive, on the same page, a high-functioning team. And I also experienced what it was like being on some teams that were unfortunately not getting to where they wanted to get to, were pretty dysfunctional, and just what that felt like. And that's really been one of these things that's been driving me, my mission and passion, to help my clients be able to be the group that they truly need to be able to bring their vision to reality.
That's amazing. And, some people are, they like working by themselves, but, this was firsthand how you get to see exactly how important teamwork actually is. That's actually pretty unique. That's one thing I love about the podcast, just meeting people in every, different background, every different niche, and learning about what they do. It's so inspiring.
Everybody has lovely, different stories and things. And it's what I like about my work too as a business coach, is coming in and, working with a leadership team and learning all about a new business. And like, wow, this is amazing. There's a business model here. I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Phyllis, you emphasize the importance of who we're being when working with your clients. So can you explain what that means and how it impacts the success of a business or individual?
Yes, so this is really, in my work, I start off, if I'm working with a leadership team or even with an individual, oftentimes the sort of the symptoms, if you like, that are getting described to me or I'm seeing at the beginning is a lot of around, the what I'd call the doing, like the to-do list, the tasks, the goals, the things in the business. And there's a lot of doing in the business. But ultimately, what I really focus on and am very passionate about, and this goes all the way back to, to that experience in the sailing days, is this idea that the culture of a group of people working together comes from their collective mindsets. And so we've gone from looking at a group of people around a table to actually, okay, they're individuals coming together as a team. And what's going on inside somebody's mind, how they're seeing the world out there. Do they see it as a world of abundance or scarcity, right? That vision of how they see the world affects the things that they bring to the leadership team table.
Right.
Then how they see each other. Do they fundamentally sort of see each other and the people in their business as doing their best? Everybody's coming to the business from whatever's going on in their personal lives, but showing up in the business, are people doing their best? Or do they, kind of have a negative view of people? I've seen all sorts of things. And then finally, the very important mindset of how do people see themselves? I work with a lot of, high-performing entrepreneurs. They're making decisions hour in, hour out every single day, and then they're lying awake at 2:00 in the morning, and they're like, did I make the right decision yesterday? Am I the right person to be leading this business, to be taking it to the next level? And so these mindsets form what I call an inner stance. So just like when you're playing sports and you're playing tennis or baseball or whatever, or basketball, you have a stance with your feet on the ground. You have a certain position that you are getting ready to leap forward and to take action. And so what the work that I do is I really see that leaders have an inner stance. They have a mental stance of which they are going from, a place they're coming from, into how they make decisions. As I say, how about they see themselves, how they see others, how they see the world. And that inner stance is their being. And so when we're finding that we are not quite getting to our goals in the business, or there's friction, there's other things, there's stuff that's not working, we can tackle things at the doing level, but ultimately we've really got to kind of step back and look at the inner stance, because if we can work at that, and that's the real sort of root cause stuff for me, is if we can work at that, then the doing becomes easier.
Right.
Because we've got just like if we're about to, hit a baseball or something, if we've got the right stance, then everything's going to flow and we're going to knock the ball out of the ballpark.
Right. No, that's great. And a lot of times you need that outside person to see it, because sometimes we just don't see it ourselves. You just think, you could have your own internal argument going on in your head, but you don't understand how it affects everything around you. And you need that outside person to say, something's not right. It's actually funny. I watched a show last night. It was something similar. A gentleman on the show was dealing with some personal issues, and he was lashing out at everybody, and his work was suffering. He was making mistakes. And it took an outside person who knew him very well, was like, what's going on? Because this isn't you. But he couldn't see it himself. He just thought he was having a bad day. You're having a bad day, that's going to have a chain reaction of a lot of bad outcomes here. So you got to have somebody else tap you on the shoulder and say, you need to adjust this stuff.
Yes, and to have that inquiry about what's going on, and that's that is my function as a coach.
Right.
And I being a coach is one thing, but I truly believe in having coaches. As a coach, I get coaches for myself too, right. Because as you're pointing out, we need somebody outside of us to reflect what's going on back to us, and to look at things, these blind spots, right? These things that everybody else can see, but we can't see in ourselves, right? And it's a gift. It's one of the most powerful things that I work on with my leadership teams, is an exercise where we really do go in and people give feedback. And so the way I facilitate this is to have a candidate, and then we go around the room and, okay, what's one thing that you admire about the person who's in the hot seat, all right, and then what's one thing that this person can work on, can improve, for the sake of the team, either start doing or stop doing for the sake of the team over the next, quarter, over the next year. And it's a gift of feedback that I truly see. It can be a little uncomfortable. Not everybody sort of is like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Because we do have that, that tribal sort of thing. Am I going to get voted off the island here? Am I going to get ejected from the tribe? It's it's a very deep, hardwired sense in us. But ultimately, all of my clients say that was the most magical, valuable thing that I've ever had in my life. I have CEOs, who are like, no one's ever given me feedback before.
They're afraid to, probably.
Yeah, afraid to, right? And so I create a safe environment for that to happen, and it becomes the most valuable thing for them that, oh my gosh, I never realized, and here's something that I can either start doing or stop doing for the good of the team. And everybody just feels it's freedom.
And it's good when you have various people doing that, because, everybody has their own little quirk. So something that I might catch on to, someone else probably would be like, that's no big deal, catch on to something different. So having a variety of people say, well, here's, like, I remember way back when with public speaking, you probably heard of Toastmasters going, and it was similar. You go out there, you give a little talk, and everybody, things that you didn't even realize you were doing, but it was, it was in a safe space, and you were kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And, you appreciate it, and you get better that way, which is exactly what you're doing.
Yes. Just everybody helping each other get better, and from a place of love, not from a place of, shame and things like that.
Right. Now tell us, you work with teams that have won global yacht races, but also with the teams that didn't succeed. So what were some of the key differences between the two, and how can these lessons be applied to businesses also?
Yeah. Well, this is the key thing that's really, this is my passion. It's what's been driving me for decades now. And, because at the time, right, when I was sort of working in that world, I could just see these differences, but I didn't really have the frameworks to be able to understand it. What many decades later now is I'm sort of really seeing that it is what I'm talking about in terms of this culture. Obviously that phrase that's been around for a long time, culture eats strategy for lunch. I see it. I see it happen. It's these mindsets, it's the internal stance of a team. And so, when we have the winning teams, that I worked with, I really see now, looking back at them and my experience of working with them, is, they were there for each other. They were there for the greater good of whatever goal it was that they were, working on together to achieve. Everybody knew their roles, but they were also had each other's backs, right? Whereas I think when the dysfunction comes in is when people aren't there for the greater good, when people are on a team for their own reasons, when there's an environment of politics. Politics means, in my definition, like there is some hidden path to the decision-making process in this team, right? So it's the things that are being done in the behind closed doors in the back rooms, right? Which it's opaque. We can't see how this team's making decisions, or at least whatever gets talked about, openly within the team. Something else happens outside of it. There are end runs. There's some other way so that's dysfunctional, right? Because the team is not really united. So it's just those sorts of characteristics. And then sort of, as I was saying earlier, like, if there are people on the team that fundamentally don't think that other people on the team are there doing their best, if there are people that are, having a very negative viewpoint about other, people are lazy, people are slackers, people are goofing off, people are stealing from me. I mean, I've seen these mindsets, right? I've heard these things articulated. That's really non-useful thinking. right? And so I just didn't know that at the time, but to see it now, um, and then I work with my clients to be able to capture that, and then to be able to see that, well, maybe we can shift our stance here. Maybe we can adjust our mental footing. Maybe we can use a different framework and see things in a different way, in a more useful way, so that we can have a more useful conversation and a more useful feeling in the team. And that's the biggest difference to me.
Yeah, I mean, the mindset is huge. Like, it's funny, I just had this conversation with my son earlier. Like he's driving down the road and someone was, annoying, honking. But long story short, he realized it wasn't against him. The man was just having a bad day and taking it out. And it was like, once everybody opened that up, everybody was happy after that. But it's like, you have to get out of that, mindset of everybody's out to get me.
Yes.
The world's a big place. We all just need to coexist, but let's figure out a way to make that happen,
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Well,
So
one
now,
of the things, sorry,
no,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just, when you talk about driving down the road, I think it's a very, it's a very easy example, because we've all driven in traffic, right? Where somebody's cut us off and, you feel that sense of like injustice or anger coming up. And, but this is sort of what I'm talking about, right? Is sort of like that mental inner stance of seeing that person cutting you off or something. But what if, you viewed it differently? Like, for example, if that person in that other car was your mother, would you feel the same way? No, you would probably be like, with forgiveness, like, oh, mum didn't realize I was there, right? Or that other, in a stance of, well, maybe they're rushing to the hospital because, a relative of theirs is in the emergency room and they're trying to get there, right? Or maybe they just didn't see you. And just like, there's this thing, like, we always give ourselves the sort of like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that person, right? But then if that same thing happens to us, we ascribe all sorts of things. So it's just it's a taking a different stance. And when you can take a different stance, you can just free yourself up. It's amazing.
100%. Yeah, it is a good example too with the driving, because I find myself in the same position where you get that massive road rage, and then, you try to think everything happens for a reason, and it's kind of like, well, maybe that prevented me from an accident 5 minutes from now. So take a deep breath. It's all good. You just, again, just seeing it differently,
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you use the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, and Positive Intelligence, PQ, frameworks in your coaching. So can you walk us through how these frameworks help leaders and teams become more cohesive and successful?
Absolutely. So they are different systems, different frameworks, and they address different parts of team dynamics. So EOS is a simple set of practical tools, and it helps my clients get three things that I call vision, traction, and healthy. So vision from the standpoint of really just helping a team of leaders come around the table and get solid about the vision for the business. Get on the same page. Where are we going and how we're going to get there? And then traction is getting the discipline, getting the accountability, becoming masters of execution to bring that vision to reality. And then healthy is just about, as we've been talking about, like, how do we all come together as a healthy, functional, cohesive leadership team? Because a lot of the time we're not. So EOS, it's a set of tools that I'm using to teach that team. They implement them in the business, and it ultimately helps them sort of harmonize all of the human energy in the business. And I just think it's so ironic that me as a mechanical engineer, that I'm, ultimately really helping groups of people with their human energy, because of my experience of seeing projects succeed or fail because of the human energy, right? It doesn't matter about all the technical stuff. It's the humans in the room that ultimately lead to the success or failures. So harmonizing the human energy. And then, so that's what EOS is doing, is getting that group of people on the same page, heading in the same direction, tamping down the chaos, getting everybody sailing in the same direction. Then PQ, the positive intelligence, is really addressing that inner stance that we've been talking about. It's looking at our thinking and not beating ourselves up and judging us, because part of what we do in the positive intelligence world is looking at thinking and seeing that, like, we all have this judging voice in our head. Yeah, we judge circumstances, we judge the world, oh my gosh, the economy, oh my gosh, the government, all these things. We judge other people, as we've just been talking about, and then we judge ourselves.
Right.
It's sort of that thing, like if you knock over a glass and spill some water, what do you say to yourself? Do you say, stupid Steve?
Yeah.
Or do you just say, well, that was an accident, that was a silly thing to do, but I'm not judging myself as being less than just because I made a mistake and knocked over a glass of water. But people, we do this all the time, right? And so we just want to look at thinking and just figure out, like, is this useful or is this not useful? Okay, if this is not useful thinking, it's this judging voice, these saboteurs, these things that sabotage our, going forward into the world, then to be able to look at that and just to realize that we have the choice to be able to shift that, and we have a choice to be able to move it. But it's simple but not easy. And what I mean by that is it's mental fitness training. So just the same way, if I want to go run a marathon, I can't just strap my running shoes on and go do 26.2 miles without training for it. And so a lot of these sort of this judging voice, the way that we go forward in the world comes from, our upbringing, the way, all of our lived experiences. We've had to cope, right? We've been in difficult situations through our life, and we've just got these mental mechanisms that have helped us survive some sort of a situation. And that was great when we were a kid. But as we've come into adulthood and we're leading businesses, we don't need to be doing these same things. They're probably not useful to us anymore, and it's time to let them go and choose a better path. And the mental fitness training is just to really realize that we get to create every single day how we want that day to be. And just getting up in the morning when the alarm goes off and coming out of bed in the morning, and just to realize that we can create our day to be what we want it to be from that point. There's a set of steps, there's training. We get better and better at that, because some of these things that come up in our lives can be very triggering, right? They can be big, heavy, weighty things, and but we've got to, when we train, we can build the mental muscles to steadily get better and better and better at dealing with these bigger and bigger things. And then when we've built the mental fitness and realize that we just start every day from this point of that we can choose, then stuff starts coming up and you're kind of like, whoa, you get knocked back, but then you rebound more quickly and you're on course with a better response, a more productive response, a response that creates possibility instead of a response that causes destruction.
That's funny. As you started this, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, it is a lot of work, and you do have to basically reprogram your mind in a sense, because people were brought up and taught certain things. So, some people in leadership skills could be in their 40s, 50s, 60s. That's many years of trying to, but I agree 100% how retraining ourselves. So it's small steps, like certain times when you just take a quick second, 60 seconds, just take a deep breath, and you'd be surprised how that would shift. But some people, their first reaction is just lash out, but you're retraining yourself, baby steps, you'll get there. So I agree 100% with everything you're saying.
We just want to be able to create, we have stimulus and response, and usually these two things are wired together. But if we can just create some space between stimulus and response, then freedom really comes from that, because we can choose what our reactions are
Right.
with training.
100%. Now, you mentioned that your work integrates mental fitness techniques such as breath work, hiking, and meditation. So how do these practices contribute to building a successful leadership mindset?
Yes, so this is what I'm talking about in terms of sort of like when you get up in the morning,
Right.
um, you know, what direction are you heading off in? And so part of this mental fitness training really is, to me, um, having tools in your toolbox to be able to choose better paths, right? And so things like meditation, journaling, maybe reading, inspirational texts and things like that are just ways of being able to stop, the non-productive, non-useful path, and just say, oh, I'm going to get off of that well-worn old path in my mind, and I'm going to create a new path in my mind. I'm going to myelinate a new path in my brain that's more useful. And so all of these become, tools that we can use. And then, obviously things like meditation, breath work is amazing to me in terms of our ability to be able to just sort of come down into our hardwired nervous system. It's fantastic. I listened to a podcast from Professor Andrew Huberman many years ago, where he talked about this thing called a physiological sigh, which it was just amazing to me. Hardwired into our nervous system is this ability to induce a relaxation response. And so he says, like when you see like a dog like circling around its bed, and then it like lies down, it will go. And it's that double inhale and a long exhale that has been proven, scientifically shown, to get our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and relax nervous system, like online. And so little techniques like that mean that, you can be like walking down a hallway knowing that you're about to go into what could be a stressful situation. Like, I've got to do a presentation in front of, 1,000 people. I've got this board meeting and I don't know how it's going to go. I've got this difficult conversation I've got to have with somebody on my leadership team that I really love, but, things are not going well, right? So these can be stressful situations, but to this physiological sigh, you can do while you're walking. And it just like, I've found for myself, it can just unlock and key me into being in a state of calm. And when I'm in that, getting better into that state, then I've got my, my thinking brain on and engaged, and I can choose better actions from that, versus if I'm in a state of stress and my amygdala is ruling the day and it's, fight, flight, or freeze. I'm not going to be making productive, useful actions from there. So just having this toolbox of tools that can be deployed no matter what the situation is, to be able to get us into a better place to take more productive actions, I think is a huge thing for a leader, because there's plenty of stress out there. There's stuff goes sideways every day in businesses. How are you able to take that on, metabolize it, and then choose a better path is key.
Right. It's funny because I did a podcast with someone else and they were talking about breath work, and we actually did it on air. It was like 60 seconds and he had me doing these breath. By the time it was done, I was like, I could just go to sleep right now. I mean, and that's what he was saying, how it was just, 60 seconds. Anybody having a crazy day, 60 seconds kind of refocuses you, and you're calm, you're at peace, and you could just take it. So it's not something, I guess there's different types of breath work. So it's not something, but if you learn how to do it and do it right, I mean, it was night and day. I wasn't like stressed, but it was kind of like, it was said, I was just like, I can take a nap right now. I am the most calmest I have ever been, and it was 60 seconds. So I agree 100%.
Mm.
Now tell us, how do you approach goal setting with your clients? Like what systems or strategies do you recommend to help them achieve their business goals while maintaining work-life balance?
Well, there's a lot of things in that question you're asking me.
In a
Yes.
nutshell.
So James Clear wrote this book, Atomic Habits. A lot of people, in the entrepreneurial world read this book, but there is a quote in that book that is absolutely key for me in the work that I do, and that is, you never rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so this to me is just, it's such an insightful quote, and it really encapsulates a lot of what I see and I work on with my clients. So on the goal setting side, it really is about being able to look at the horizon. Jim Collins calls it what's the big, hairy, audacious goal? Like, what's the moonshot? Like, truly, what's the inspiring place that we want to get to with this business? And then I walk through a process of sort of taking that long range vision and bringing it down to the ground. So in EOS, we'll set maybe like a 10-year goal for the business, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Then we'll bring it down to 3 years in the future. What's this business going to look like? Because sometimes 10 years can be kind of, a little too far out for people to visualize. So let's look at 3 years from now, 3 short years from now. What's this business going to look like? And then we bring that closer down to the ground with a 1-year plan, and then we break that down into quarters. So there's a very sort of staged process of taking a vision and bringing it down to like, what do we need to do? But then ultimately, the success or failure of that, in my experience, comes down to the systems. And that's really where I work on much more with my clients now is, okay, I understand the goal, but what's the system that we're going to put in place? So, for example, I was working with some clients a little while ago. They're a roofing business. And so how do we get to a goal of a certain amount of revenue in a roofing business? Well, we have to install roofs and get 5-star Google reviews. Okay, good. Now, how do you install a roof? Well, we've got to go out and do an inspection on somebody's roof and, figure out if the roof needs to be replaced. Got it. Okay, well, how do you go do an inspection on a roof? Well, we've got to make an appointment to go, see that roof and to talk with the homeowner. Okay, well, how do you get an appointment? Well, we have to call people. Okay, who's making the calls? And there was, silence in the room, right? And so I'm just going through this example, but the thing is they weren't meeting their revenue goal because they didn't have a reliable system in place. And I see this a lot with, construction and contracting businesses. I had another set of clients who were all about, like, they have had a call center in their business, and their thing was, we answer the phone. And any of us who've, ever tried to get any work done on your house, like you call people, you never get a call back, all of this thing. So these other set of clients were knocking the ball out of the ballpark because they had a system in place to answer the phone. And with that, all possibility could be created once you can get into a conversation with somebody. So anytime I'm sort of seeing we're not reaching our goals, stuff's happening, things are going sideways, it's just like, okay, well, what's the system? What's the system we got in place? And once again, not to point fingers and beat people up and things like that, but is the system working or not working? That's all. It's just a system. If it's not working, well, let's get rid of that system and find one that does work, right? Or we improve the one. Maybe we just need to tweak what wasn't working with the current system. Or maybe we just need to go look and see who else has got a system that's working. Copy what they're doing.
Yeah.
and put it in the business. But it just and this works personally too, right? I mean, I sort of, there's like, that judging voice that I'm talking about before. If we're beating ourselves up because we don't have a system in place, just, it's not about judging yourself. It's just like whatever system I've got, it's just not working. And let's find a different one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're seeking, your guidance, they should be open to change if need be, or open to figuring out how to make this work. And I mean, obviously, you have great case studies, so I mean, the proof is in the pudding there.
Mm.
So now tell us, as your permaculture farm in Colorado, you provide a space for clients to reconnect and ground themselves. So how does nature and physical space play a role in mental clarity and business success?
Yeah, so this is what I'm creating this year. It's a work in progress, but it's being born from the real sort of foundation to me that is, when you're inside a system, when you're in the whirlwind of the business, you really can't sort of see what's going on. And in fact, this is a quote that we teach our clients in the EOS process. It comes from a mathematician philosopher called Kurt Gödel, who was a contemporary of Einstein. And he really sort of saw like when you're inside a system, you can't really sort of see and understand, the mechanics. You have to step outside that system.
Right.
You have to be able to get some perspective and look at it. So what I tend to find is if I'm working with clients and I'm in their office and the phone's ringing and the texts are going and people are knocking on the door, hey boss, this sort of stuff, like we're stuck inside the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working to create this place where on our farm in Colorado where our clients are going to be able to come and get outside of the whirlwind of their business and get a little bit of perspective. We're very, very lucky here. We have a beautiful property, and there is a 25-acre field. It takes about half an hour to walk around it. We have a 14,000-foot mountain with snow on it that's keeping watch over us from one end of the field in the distance. There's lakes, but it just walking around that field, doing a sort of a walking meditation, if you like, and just slowing things down, realizing, I think when you're in nature, it really does give you the sense, and particularly with a 14,000-foot mountain watching over you, like you have that sense of there's things that are just bigger than me right now, right? There's something larger than this little nitnoid issue that I'm wrapped around the axle about in my business. And so if I can get that perspective, it really does start putting some of these other things, into their relative things. Like, is this really something that you should be getting all, beat up about? Or is this just a little thing in the grand scheme of things? And I think nature, at least for myself, I find this to be able to be out there, to be doing some deeper breathing, to be sort of realizing that, there's an order to things. Things happen for a reason. Gets you the perspective to then start having more useful, productive ways of looking at what's going on in the business and yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I hear it like a lot of other companies having retreats and whatnot, and it is true, taking people away from, that whole center, having a relaxing time, a weekend, just relaxing and then talking about things. You're like a totally other person, and then you come back fully refreshed. Like, wow, it's almost like soul searching in a way, but it does kind of, basically you start fresh after that. So I think, I'm rooting for you on that.
Thank you.
Now, you've been an avid practitioner of self-mastery and continuous learning. So can you share some of the most impactful resources or practices that have helped shape you and your personal development journey?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, it's been a long journey. I think, the pivotal thing for me has been this mental fitness training, even this sort of like this concept really of that we can choose our inner stance has been revolutionary for me. And so, what I've sort of experienced, and, this is what happens with my clients and all of us as humans, right? There's that very easy mental talk track, which is, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get that new job. I'll be happy when I get that new car. I'll be happy when I get the pay raise. I'll be happy when I get a new client. All of these, it's a very human, common track to have in our minds. The putting off of happiness into the future contingent upon something happening that's frankly outside of our control. And so, when I get that pay raise, then I'll be able to, buy a new car, and then I'll be able to go for a drive in the mountains, and then I'm going to be happy. Oh my gosh, it's going to be great. So the pivotal thing for me has been the distinction of reverse engineering this and flipping it around. And so instead of sort of what I would call the have, do, be construct, when I have something, I'll be able to do something, then I'll be happy. We flip it around and look at the things we ultimately get, the things that we have, come from the things that we do in life, the actions that we take. The actions that we take come from who we are being, our identity, our inner mental stance. When we're being a certain way, then we will take certain actions in accordance with that, and then we will have things. So, for example, for me, a very personal story is, alcohol was a part of my life for a very, very long time. And, I had tried things like, I've sort of had this sense like maybe it wasn't serving me very well at times. I don't think anybody kind of ever wakes up in the morning wishing that they'd drunk more the night before.
Yeah.
So I've had this sort of sense like this is not really kind of serving me, but my identity was sort of really wrapped around it, right? You have a glass of wine with dinner, you go out with friends, or I go to a business networking event, and the idea of like being at a business networking event and not having a beer in my hand is like, oh my gosh, is that a thing? Can I even do that? And so I would do things like dry January, right? And then I would but I would do it from a place of being, my inner stance was around depriving myself, and also a place of lack. And so I would, like white knuckle it through January and get to February 1 and, then crack the top off a bottle of wine and make up for lost time, right? Not productive, not really kind of very helpful in the grand scheme of things, but using this construct of, starting from a place of being, finally enabled me to change this whole narrative. And if I could, and what I did do was to change my inner mental stance to what's really important for me and who I'm being is I'm about getting to the centenarian Olympics. I'm about having my health and wanting to like maximize my health span so I can be around for my grandkids and my great grandkids and to enjoy life. And from that place of being that, well, who would a person who fundamentally wants to get to the centenarian Olympics, what do? Well, maybe they might decide that alcohol's not serving them anymore and it's time to let that go. And that's what happened with me. And so, to really shift like who I see myself as being, and then to live from that place and to take actions from that place has allowed me in many, areas of my life to change what I'm ultimately getting, right? And what I get now is, when I go get my blood work done, it's looking better. When I'm getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, my head's clearer and I can, just create a lot more. I'm just freer to create more from that place. But it comes from who I've been being and, my inner mental stance. And so the fundamental shifting that around, reverse engineering it, and coming from a different place makes it so much easier.
That makes 100% sense. I mean, yeah, because everybody, they'll blame it on, oh, it was my life, oh, it was my upbringing, oh, it was my teacher, it was this. It doesn't matter. Where do you want to be? Let's try to get you there. So I think that's really, really important. So tell us, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are feeling stuck in their business, and how can they start moving forward, especially when they feel overwhelmed or uncertain?
Which is a very common thing, right? Because what I see is entrepreneurs, business owners, maybe they start a business, they're very enthusiastic about it. We've got a great product that I'm making or a fantastic service that I'm delivering, and I start selling stuff and things start working, and now I need to start hiring people and delegating, and then all of a sudden we've got like 15 people in the business, and then they get to that point where I'm starting to feel like the business is running me and not me running the business. Like I just don't have my arms around it anymore. It's just a very natural part of the evolution of businesses. So I think the biggest thing to say is that the good news is there are systems, like this comes back to sort of the goals versus systems things, right? If we want to grow the business, what we need to do is to put a system in place that sustainably allows you to do that. And so that is the work that I do with the entrepreneurial operating system. So if we want to, address the whirlwind, if we want to address the overwhelm, then we just need to put a system in place that's going to more beneficially, sustainably deal with that. And there's a whole bunch of different components in that. It's, once again, simple but not easy. But the good news is that there is something that you can do, right? You don't have to be stuck. You can choose a different path. And that taking that, that change in that stance, if we cast it in this context of being, right, and identity, who would I have to be a cool, calm, collected leader of my $20 million business?
Right.
How would that person show up? What would that person be doing, right? And then we can look at all of those things, because if we can write down what that person would be doing, then I can reverse engineer that to being, right? What's that person's mental inner stance? And the distinction that we can choose that is key. You don't have to stay stuck.
Right. Yeah, I guess people just need to really focus on it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but you can make it happen, and it's practice, practice, practice. I love that. So now tell us, looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of leadership coaching, and how do you see the role of mindset and self-awareness evolving in the business world?
That's a good question. I think for me, I just, I love the work that I do. I love spreading the word in terms of just what I've been talking about today. And that's why I love doing podcasts like this, to get the idea out there that you don't have to be stuck. We can choose, right? And then here's a system that, a mental fitness training system. I think there are very intriguing things happening in terms of AI coming up in the world, right? And I do see in some networking groups that I'm in, people saying, oh, I don't need a coach. I can just train ChatGPT. And I'm like, yes, okay, sure. In some areas, I think it's got its uses, particularly if we're sort of wanting to maybe explore the space of possibility. I think that's sort of some of the things that AI is very good at, is sort of taking a whole bunch of information and then sort of sifting out the patterns, or maybe revealing patterns that we may or may not see. But it's not a be-all and end-all. it's not replacing like the work that I ultimately see when I'm in a room with a leadership team is, you know, why is the CFO leaning back with their arms crossed? They haven't said anything for 15 minutes. Why is the visionary scratching the back of their head and looking pretty antsy? Why is head of operations look like they're about to blow a fuse? Right? Those are the sorts of things that a human being, right, as a coach, of really being able to sense the energy of the room, sense when somebody's withholding, like sense, and we can, we can do this. This is what we do as human beings, and particularly as coaches, we train, more deeply to sort of see these things. But this, we have a subconscious sense when somebody's kind of like maybe holding their breath. We have a subconscious sense when we can see that somebody's muscles are tense. It's very subtle cues, but they come from our being members of a tribe, right? I think they're very sort of deep and hardwired into us. So I think when you ask about the future, I see this great possibility of AI sort of, maybe opening up fields of possibility, but I still see, the human in the loop. I saw a very interesting interview with the CEO of NVIDIA a little while ago, talking about how humans and AIs, they have, human engineers and AI engineers working together to just be able to leapfrog and create more amazing places where they can take their business. And he was talking about how they've been able to improve the power of their AI chips like 5 times in a year versus that used to take years. But it's the human and the AI together. And I'm intrigued by that same concept in terms of coaching. Not to have one replace the other or one work in exclusivity of the other, but what's the possibility of that together? And I think we're 2 years into a journey with a technology that's probably going to be with humanity for forever. Yeah. But we've got no idea at this stage. Are we using it right? What's it going to look like?
We're the guinea pigs, yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It has its place, but also, it doesn't understand emotions. So, like you said, you can tell when someone's because if all it's doing is reading whatever you're plugging into it. So you can ask me every question, and I could just tell you whatever answer you want to hear. But you can tell she's lying. She's holding back. AI is not going to know that. So like you said, it can replace certain type of things, but I think for this, you need that people skill, which AI I don't think it's ever going to get that. But yeah, but interesting stuff.
Interesting stuff. Yes. Yeah.
Now, anything else you want to talk about that we didn't already touch on?
No, this has been great. I do want to, as we've sort of talked and you've asked me these questions about tools and things like that.
Right.
So on my website at stevemorriscoaching.com, I have a free course, and it's called Creating Your Morning of Distinction.
Nice.
And so a lot of these things that I've talked about today, I have this course. It's got 10 steps in it. They're like 5 minutes each. So the whole thing's like less than an hour. But it's just a set of tools that somebody can take and put in their toolbox, to be able to start their day. And as I call it, creating your morning of distinction, because to me, the morning is everything. It's your compass heading for the day. If we can set off on the right compass heading, great things can happen. Yeah. If we set off on the wrong compass heading, we're going to be wandering around. We're already off track at the beginning of the day, right? So this is just a set of simple tools. It's free. People can get access to it. And if it just helps one person have one morning where they set off in the right direction, that makes me a happy person.
Nice. So how can people get a hold of you? I mean, learn more about you on your website, but if they want to reach you through the website also?
Yes, certainly there's the ability within the website to be able to send me a message, or people can just reach out, steve@stevemorriscoaching.com. Pretty straightforward. And we always just start with a conversation. We create everything through conversation. And I just love hearing from people and what is it that they would like to create.
Oh,
And we
nice.
go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Steve Morris. So thanks for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel, and be sure to click the bell notification to see new episodes. So thank you again.
Thank you, Patty. Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.